So I thought I'd take a bit of time today to talk about the Lesser Key of Solomon, or in fact the Greater and Lesser Key of Solomon and the Testament of Solomon, which forms the basis of those two books, which is attributed to King Solomon but is very likely to have had other origins, probably written by somebody else under Solomon's name. It first sort of came to light in the 1600s as part of like the revival at the time of interest in magic, but it's very likely that it had much older origins in other magical books. So basically there are a number of texts, and those texts are all very complicated, but the first one that we can be concerned with is called the Testament of Solomon. Now, the Testament is a non-canonized testament that potentially could have gone into the Bible but didn't. Solomon did have other texts which made their way into the Bible. However, the Testament of Solomon tells a story about how the material that's in the Lesser Key of Solomon and the Greater Key of Solomon came about, essentially, and talks about the Solomon's ring. And this ring was given to him by the Archangel Michael. There is a story behind that as to why the angel gave him the ring, but essentially the ring can control demons and can contain demons and get demons to do the magician's bidding, and ultimately got those demons to build his temple by employing their particular skills and using them for good. So basically turning the energies or the skills that those demons had into a constructive force. And Michael says, "With it thou shalt lock up all demons of the earth, male and female, and with their help thou shalt build up Jerusalem." So within the first book, the Testament of Solomon, we'll call it the first book, there are other books prior which potentially could be connected to this book or possibly predecessors of that book. King Solomon, who was considered a magician in his own sense, receives this magical ring. And so the next book, the Greater Key of Solomon. Now the Greater and the Lesser Keys, the name Greater and Lesser doesn't denote that the Greater is a more important book and that the Lesser is not as important. It's a bit like the Greater and the Lesser Sabbats, in that it's a way that defines two separate entities, if you like. The Greater is the first book that was produced basically out of the two. So in the Greater Key of Solomon, we find a lot of the practices that you will be working with as a modern practitioner. They form the basis of so many of those practices, and the structure of ritual, the circle, and lots of other much more complicated or detailed kind of aspects of the craft, even right down to some traditions which you would think would be absolutely unconnected to ceremonial magic whatsoever, but they are. So that's, in a nutshell, what is in the Greater Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is, again, a book that's believed to have come after the Greater Key, therefore it's the Lesser Key. And this is a book, well, in fact, several manuscripts which are put together into one book, including the Goetia, list of 72 demons. The history of those demons I'm probably likely to go into in another video, because that's really, really interesting where some of those came from, but essentially pre-monotheistic spirits. And so in the Lesser Key, it lists these demons, and it also discusses the way that these demons can be supplicated or invoked, including the sigils of those demons, or the seals, and a way to communicate with those demons and contain and control them. And even though the Key of Solomon has been largely Christianized, the origins of that magic are much older and can be found in several other older grimoires and magical texts and spell books too. So that's just a short little introduction on what the Keys of Solomon and the Testament of Solomon can contain, and I will go into detail in another video about that content in each book.